Okay. Okay, we're continuing with the Maimah that we began last week. Achana Shel Pesach, the last day of Pesach, Tavshin Yudalad, 1954. The Rebbe delivered this discourse at the Fabrengen, the gathering of Achana Shel Pesach of that year, 1954. It began with a verse from the prophecy of Yeshaya, which is basically in Isaiah, it is chapter 11, that speaks about the spiritual potential that Mashiach will have. And then the Rebbe asks questions, and then the Rebbe begins explaining a concept which is mentioned in many discourses from the Chabad rabbis, and it's explained on different levels in different worlds. And the Rebbe discusses it at length in this discourse and in the discourse that follows, which is the Shabbos after Pesach, Tavshin Yudalad, 1954. So the Rebbe begins, V'yuven ze behegdem, it'll be understood, Mashomre Razal, that the Razal say, Eirein Sof, L'maylo, Mayla Den Kate, that the infinite revelation is high up without any end, without any limitation, without any ultimate limitation. It goes high up and it goes low, very low, the lowest levels. In other words, that godliness permeates everywhere. And it's known the question that is asked, when we're speaking about higher and lower, even in a ruchnistic sense, which it means, as the Rambam writes in Hilchas Sedi Atera, that when we speak about higher and lower, it means basically level, spiritual level. That's what higher and lower means. And as the Rebbe Rashab explains it in the Maimer, the Chanukah Maimer, that higher and lower is constituted by the fact what is closer to revelation of godliness and what is further than revelation. If it's, for example, closer to godliness, so then it's considered higher. That is what makes it higher. And what is farther from godliness, from an obvious revelation of godliness, so that is called lower. So this is what the Rebbe is saying, that even when we're speaking about higher and lower in a spiritual sense, Gvul is limitation. Everything is limitation. How could we say that the infinite revelation is higher and lower, which means that the higher and lower are a significant dimension from the perspective of the infinite revelation? That really, we could have said at first glance, that when we're speaking about higher and lower, we're not speaking about the infinite revelation itself, but we're speaking about the level of worlds, that there's higher worlds, lower worlds. That what it means, higher and lower, is that it's found in all the levels in all the worlds, but not that the revelation itself there's a higher and there's a lower. The Maila indicates very high to the extreme, Mata to the lowest extremity ad in tachlis. So if so, if we are speaking that in regards to the revelation itself, it would be more appropriate to say that there's nothing concealed from him. He's everywhere. Why is there even a need to say that there's a higher and there's a lower? And when we say higher and lower, that means even the one that's found in the higher and lower is, we say there's a higher, there's a lower, which means they're two separate categories. They are dimensions, significant dimensions, even from the perspective of the revelation. He breaks it down into two concepts. And when he breaks it down into two different categories, that means that they're separate, they're two different concepts. That means that also from the perspective of the revelation itself, the infinite revelation, there's a higher and there's a lower, and each one is significant in its own right. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe introduces immediately the Rebbe Marash. It's actually, there's a mimer from all the Rabbeim on this concept, as we see it in the footnote, in the last page, that there is Tafresh Chav Zayin, that's the Rebbe Marash, and then there is the Tzemach Tzedek, Then there's Vayelech Samach Vov, that's the Rebbe Rashab. Then there's Imri Bino, the Mittel Rebbe. Then there's Boy Tov Rishpei, again the Rebbe Rashab. Then there's Sitkas Pirzeine, the Mittel Rebbe. So you have all the Rabbeim discussing this union, and actually, let's not forget, Hemshach Distalkos, that then there is also the Basiligani. The Basiligani in the last 10 chapters of the discourse, this series of the Maimorim of Basiligani, basically speak about the union of Ein Sof, Lamaila Dein Kates. He explains the same concept as he discusses here. So actually we have it from all the Rabbeim. The Rebbe blends it together, and we'll soon see what comes out from the Maimer. V'hini Admor Marash, the Rebbe Marash in Tofresh Chav Zayin, which is in 1867, the Rebbe Marash explains, Shebechdei Lohovin, to understand Inyan Zeh Ein Sof Lamaila Dein Kates, or Mata Dein Tachlis, to understand how the Ein Sof, the infinite revelation, is very high up and very low down. Yesh lahagdim tchila inyan atzilus ubya. It'll be understood by explaining the difference between atzilus and bya. Atzilus is the highest from this group of four worlds, and bya is basically bria yitzir asiyah. And what the Rebbe is going to be discussing is basically the difference between the body of a person and the garments of the person. The body of the person is part of the person. It is the garment of the neshama, but it's connected with the neshama. It's inseparable, hopefully till 120. And the garments of the neshama are basically, the garments of the person are basically more removed from the soul. It is not so connected with the soul as the body itself is connected. So therefore, this is what the Rebbe is going to explain. It's a very clear maimer. The Rebbe mamish tzebrekels it, and as I mentioned last week, this is also edited. This was edited by the Rebbe, and it came out for Pesach Tavshem Mem Ches to be studied during the Yom Tov of Pesach, Achanishal Pesach, 1988. So the Rebbe continues the maimer. The Achiluk ben Atzilus leByahu, the difference between Atzilus and Bya. What is the difference between these four worlds? The world Atzilus, which is a world for itself, and Bya, which are basically the lower worlds. Hu kidisa b'tikun hazeyar, as it says in Tikun hazeyar, which is basically as a supplement to the Zeyar, ba'amaimer, which is basically 70 tikunim. Tikun hazeyar is called 70 tikunim, and it was a mineg in Lubavitch, Amol, that they would learn at Elul time. Elul time, they would, during the month of Elul, there would be a kvias that they would learn Tikun hazeyar in Lubavitch. And as the Rebbe mentions it in the Sikha in Tavshin Chav Beis, 1962. So therefore, Ba'amaimer Pasach Alayo, V'cham o Gufen Tikin Aslein, this Giriyu Gufen Legabe Levushin Demchasen Aleim. It could very well be, I never really delved into it, that the Yem Yem of Elul might very well be reflecting the concepts that are discussed in the Tikkun Hazeyar of that day. I think there are Tikkun Hazeyars today that the mamish have like the breakdown for every day, timetable, what they learn every day. So B'meila, the Rebbe says in Tikkun Hazeyar, it says in Pasach Eliyahu, which we say Friday evening before Mincha, Friday late afternoon, B'cham Gufim Tikinas Lein, these Giriyu Gufo and Gufin Legabi Levushin the Mechasin Aleim, that you created many bodies. They are referred to bodies in comparison to garments. What does it mean, bodies? It doesn't mean anything physical. She'esas firas atzilus hein gufin. The 10 attributes of atzilus are considered gufin, basically bodies. Bodies in comparison to the revelation of the infinite worlds that are higher than atzilus. Ubiya, gamma esas firas de biya. They're also the 10 attributes of bria, yitzira, and Asiya, and levushim le'esas sfiras d'Atzilus. They are considered garments for the attributes of Atzilus. So these are levels. The Atzilus is considered the body, as a body for the soul. So they are they contain the infinite revelation higher than Atzilus. And Bya is considered garments for Atzilus, for the body. Shemislapshes u'miskases behem. The attributes of Atzilus are enclosed and covered and concealed in Bya, which means the revelation of what is found in the world of Elam Habriya, Yitzira Asiya, are considered garments, remote, alien, foreign, separate entity in a sense, and they conceal under revelation that comes from Atzilus. In addition to that, Malchus Atzilus is like compared to a curtain that dims the light from Atzilus into Biyah. So this is also a tzimtzum, because there are many different tzimtzumim, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, I think it's in chapter 48, 49, Akoponim, he speaks over there, B'negiyah to Kama tzimtzumim. This is also a tzimtzum, a contraction. There's a contraction removing the revelation. There's a contraction of a whole bunch of stones, a parable that's given like a bunch of stones, in the same way that you have, for example, letters that are in a certain sequence, and then you have a Scrabble. Can't figure out what they are. So then the light does not pass, is not obvious coming through the letters, because we can't figure out what they mean. You have to know how to break the code, or whatever. So therefore, this is the mashal, how Keser is, between Keser and Atzilus, there's a tzimtzum. That is considered avonim bilti misudorim. Stones unorganized. Not in any sequence, not in any specific layout. So this is also a tzimtzum, but not as much as its first tzimtzum, which was before the creation, and not as little as the tzimtzum of the curtain, not as low as the tzimtzum of the curtain that dims the light from Atzilus into Biyah. That is considered a Masach HaMavdil. So it's considered an Eir Shel Tulda, secondary light. So B'meila, the Rebbe is continuing. And the Alter Rebbe explains, Pasach Eliyahu is a very famous maimer. It's a maimer, the Alter Rebbe says it in Tereir and Vayera. The Rebbe Rashab wrote his comments on it, about 80 pages, called Hagos L'Divri HaMaschal Pasach Eliyahu. There was a chassid that saw it on the Rebbe Rashab's window. He took it and wrote it over, and then he gave it back. The Rebbe mentioned it. I don't think he mentioned the name of the Maimer, but they say this was it basically. And in 1982, 83, or maybe 84, Kohos published it. Hagos L'Divra Maschal Pasach Eliyahu. I think today it should be in the Maimorim of Tofresh Nun Ches, because that's the year that but he wrote Hagos, and how did they do it? He takes the Maimer of the Alter Rebbe, and quotes the Alter Rebbe, and then in brackets he's Biyurim, I think, and he like goes through what Atzilus means with Biyah. You really get a geschmack, because he's like talking about the Inyonim and Teira'ir, which is a Bechlal, a basic Maimer. The Maimer and Teira'ir speaks about the difference between Atzilus and Biyah. And it's interesting, that week in Vayera, we mentioned last week that the Alter Rebbe from Yisrakshus, from excitement, he couldn't say more than Atzi. But actually, and he called it Avim. They called it up there, Atzilus up there. In that Maimer, Itaka speaks about Erdon of Eres, so he also speaks about the union of up and lower. So it's also the same, so everything falls in together in that week, Sayem Yem. So the Rebbe says, the achilik ben gufim v'levushin Atzilus ubiyah, the difference between body and the garment is yuben machilik sheben guf v'levush k'meshu badu. It is like the difference in the person himself between the body and the garment. Mipsori yachzeh, a person could see godliness from their flesh. In other words, this gives them a reflection of what it is in the spiritual level. What is the reason for that? Because one comes from the other. Al derech, like the Rebbe says, Menegir to a Gemara. The Gemara says in Broches, Malchus da'ara ke'em Malchus da'rakia. That the Malchus, the royalty here in this physical world is similar to Lamaila. So the Rebbe says, and B'meila, and when we want to bring a moshel to understand Lamaila, so we say moshel memelech basav adam, from a king here Lamata. So the Rebbe says the reason is because the melech basav adam comes from the melech Lamaila.